guess we're going to start this.
We have applause.
We have applause. Look, we have an alarm. Let's get it. Let's go.
Nice.
I even have a cussing bleep. You mother, you goddamn. See, you just got to run with it, right? Hey, yo, this is your boy, Miguel. This is Common Conversations. And my hostess with the mostest, Missy, is sitting across from us. What's good? Let's go. Let's get it.
Yeah. Hi, friends.
I love the hi friends. I'm going to secretly tell you something later about the hi friend thing. I love it when it comes from you. I hate it when it comes from other people because I'll be looking at people to be like, hi friend. And be like, you are not my fucking friend. I'm just saying it's not true. Like, don't hi friend me. But I get it because we're in a world of pronouns. But friend is friend a pronoun?
For me, I mean, everyone's my friend.
Everyone's your friend.
Yeah.
We're going to have to define friend. So this whole show is about, this is Common Conversations. This is your boy, Miguel. And we talk about everything under the sun, from politics to life to sex. The first time you lost your virginity. Notice I said the first time you lost your virginity. The first time you smacked a cop. I mean, please don't do that. You might go to jail. So that might have been the first time you went to jail. So we
Many
talk
stories
about
in one.
the conversations that are on your table, on your couch, on your chair. This is what we do, how we do it, and why we get down. And so Missy and I have joined together. Y'all should see it. Like, we have like these cool new avatars.
I'm excited.
And we're Jedis. Or I think we're Sith.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No.
See, I'm gonna bend it for her. She's gonna be a Sith. She just doesn't know. Did you not look at the paper?
I did. But well, when this comes out, that avatar, they've already seen it.
I know.
And you can tell me, friends, I am a Jedi.
Sith.
A Jedi.
Well, we are who we want to be. That is
Right.
the benefits of being in this world and existence, right? And you said you had no imagination.
I mean, I have lots. In different ways.
So
I'm a nerd, but
So you're more nerd than geek?
I'm a nerd. I'm a geek, but playing imaginary friends was never my thing.
Okay, got it. That's just weirdo. That's my department. Everybody, playing with imaginary friends is the weirdo part. My daughter calls me a weirdo, so it works for me. I looked it up once, the definition. If you don't know what it is, look it up, because I'm not going to tell you. Again, I don't do your research. I just tell you stuff, and it's up to you to fact find it.
There you go. So you like being a weirdo, though?
Oh, true story.
Yes.
It is so great being the strangest person in the room sometimes. Don't get me wrong. I've walked in some rooms and I was like, yo, what the fuck?
Beep.
What is that? Oh, yeah, beep. So for the judges that are listening, it's not the first time you heard this language. I've been behind the court. I've heard you say worse. For the police that are listening, well, you say that all the time. And for our friends that are listening, you know me. It is what it is. But I did promise for this series, because this is being sponsored, hosted, and provided by a whole bunch of people I've never met, that we would be somewhat PG-13.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that means, because my ratings aren't your ratings. But I'll do better. So, all right, look, we have a great guest in here. And she's looking at me like, yo, if y'all get to the point and quit goofing off on this, I'm going to have issues because I'm not a part of the conversation. You can chime in even though we have not introduced you. I'm not going to say your name. I'm going to leave it up to you. No, I'm just playing. We are going to introduce you. We have a great guest. So what is this show about?
This show is about telling the truth. The truth about Southern Indiana and the people and the communities within Southern Indiana. We know that we are closely connected with other communities around us, but Southern Indiana itself doesn't really have a voice. It doesn't have coalitions. It doesn't have the infrastructure to start having these conversations where we can really tell the truth. So this is the beginning of that journey. This is the beginning of telling the truth about the people who live around us. And this journey is about what stories do we tell ourselves so we can feel good and so we can sleep at night. But what's the real truth behind that? And then knowing that truth, what do we do next? And that's why we have Iris here with us. Iris and I have known each other for over 10 years, which still blows my mind once we realize that. And Iris, we met because she worked for me.
I did.
So let's talk about that. Introduce yourself.
Okay.
And let's talk about your journey in Southern Indiana and what brought you to what you do now.
Okay. My name is Iris Rubadue, and I currently am the program coordinator for the Clark County Family Recovery Court. I'm also a Clark County probation officer, and I've been doing that for nearly 10 years. In February, it'll be 10 years. Prior to that, I worked for you at New Hope Services in the Healthy Families Department. Mm-hmm. And then prior to that, I worked at Hazelwood Middle School, running their after-school programming for Family and Children's Place.
Yes, shout out to all of our friends at Hazelwood.
Crazy question. Where does your last name come from?
It's actually French.
Okay.
It used to be, so it's spelled with a DUE at the end. It was DEAUX at one point.
Really?
Yes.
Was that like a conscious family change?
It wasn't me. I think it was, ancestors to my ancestors probably.
Okay.
But when it came over here from France, it became DUE.
Cool.
I don't really know. It doesn't make it easier for people to pronounce, so I'm not really sure why in the world they did that.
Well, it's an Americanized name now at that point, right?
Correct.
So I love it.
Thank you.
How do people say it if they don't say it the way it's actually? It looks like what it is.
A lot of people say Rubadue.
Rubadue.
I'm like, so it's spelled R-U-B. And I'm like, how do you spell the word rub? Is R-U-B, right?
Yeah.
So they make the U long, right? So that's a lot of people say Rubadue.
So
Rubadue or Rubadue or all kinds of sorts of
Your
things.
whole last name is a t-shirt.
It's just something else.
It's like Louisville, right? You got 100 different ways to say it.
So many different ways.
So Iris Rubadue.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So Iris, tell us now. You work. We lovingly call it drug court.
Yep.
So tell us what that is. What do you do for family recovery court?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? What is that?
So even in what you just said, so drug court, that connotation is negative.
Mm-hmm.
And so within the last several years at, our national conferences and things like that, we've talked about the transition in the names. And so Family Recovery Court is a program that is offered through Clark County Circuit Court number 4. And we have sort of partnered with the Department of Child Services in that respect, right? So what we do is we accept folks into our program who are struggling with the disease of addiction and who have or are in danger of losing their kiddos to the state due to that issue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a voluntary program. We currently serve 42 people in the program. So we also have a specific unit of Department of Child Services case managers who work with us. And the program is designed to be sort of non-adversarial. So in that respect, when you think of going to court, right, you think of an adversarial approach because you're going in front of a judge. There's attorneys. There's people asking you questions. You're in a courtroom. You're in a courthouse. You go through security to get through the door, even down to that respect. And so the point of the Family Recovery Court and problem-solving courts as a whole is for people to be able to walk in and know that they have a voice in that respect. They can go in and talk about their struggles. They can go in and talk about where they need extra support. And they can do that in front of a judge who hears them and listens to them, and it becomes like a family, basically.
So to be in your program, so you're saying it's voluntary. So that's really interesting. You have to be someone who deals with the disease of addiction and has a child, and that child is somehow affected and has come to the attention of DCS.
Correct.
And for those who don't know what that stands for, it's Department of Child Services, also colloquially known as CPS, and everyone calls it something different, but we call it DCS in our world. So I want to speak to how unique it is for Clark County to have that, because this has only existed for the last...
Well, our program was created in 2011.
So roughly just over 10 years. And not every community has a family recovery court. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you know communities around us? Do any other counties have that?
So I do know that Floyd County, where I'm sitting right now, actually created and they call it Hope Court, and it is the same sort of idea. It's a family recovery court as well. So that's the closest one that I know of. I know that Columbus, so Bartholomew County has one. There's several in the state of Indiana. I don't know how many exactly, and they are slowly but surely becoming. And when I say they, I say family recovery courts are known as problem-solving courts. That's what they are. And so there are other problem-solving courts. There are adult addiction courts. There are juvenile addiction courts. There are mental health courts. There's DUI courts. There's all sorts of problem-solving courts. And they're becoming much more prevalent throughout the United States as a whole because they've been proven to work.
Right. They're effective.
I totally have a question, right?
Yes.
So
bring it.
We're calling court problem-solving. So typically when you're going to court, it's because you're going to jail or you just got out of jail or you're avoiding jail. So we're calling, is that the element of problem solving?
So no, not specifically for my population, right? So they're not Typically, they are not in jail when I get to them. But for some cases, yes. However, that's not the problem. Jail is not really the problem at that point. The problem is the DUIs or the addiction or the homelessness or the mental health issues that they have going on. Those are the problems that we're looking to solve.
Okay.
At that point.
And so how does court, just in my world, again, most people want to avoid being a part of the system, being in the system. Going to court means that you're on a journey to being a slave in the United States, right? Just by amendment, right? And so when I hear, I'm just, because you're throwing it out here and it's like problem solving. I'm like, has a court ever solved my problems? It's created my problems, whether I got a DUI or I was out selling drugs, not I specifically, we're talking about the proverbial I, right? Or proverbial you. Yeah. So how does it actually solve a problem?
So we have, specifically for my court, on Wednesdays is our court day, right? And so Wednesday morning we have a staffing. And that staffing meeting includes treatment providers, as in therapists, home-based caseworkers, visitation supervisors, the Department of Child Services, public defenders from the county that represent our folks, DCS attorneys, or one DCS attorney currently, and then myself, our two other case managers with Family Recovery Court, and our judge. And we sit in that room on Wednesday mornings, and we talk about every single person who is participating in our program. We talk about where they're at with housing, where they're at with their therapy, where they're at with visitations. How's that going? Do we need more work on parenting? We talk about all sorts of things, what they're doing well in, where they might need some extra support in. And then starting, later in the morning, we start having court, and we have court at 10:45 and then we have court at 1:45. We have 2 different sessions. And yes, I think it's quite terrifying for folks at first when they come in and they see like the judge in her robe up on the bench, because that in and of itself is terrifying. But they also, whenever they're called up to sort of give their weekly update to the judge, their whole entire team stands around them. So those therapists, those home-based caseworkers, those people who are literally out here on the ground, on the front lines, working with these folks, they're with them in court, and they come up and they stand behind them as the judge is asking him or her, how's your week been? What's been going on? And he or she can update and say, I'm going to fail this screen. Or I had one young lady who kept track of all of her negative drug screens. And so she would come in and say, Judge, 167th negative drug screen this week, or whatever, you know what I mean? Mm. And so then judge can then follow up with, well, here's what we're going to do. Or we talked about in staffing, and this is what we're looking at. And yeah, people think punitive. People think sanctions. People think negative. That's not our goal. Our goal is to support while holding accountable.
So what I'm hearing is, in a vacuum of case management, these are things like wraparound services, another way to look at this. Mm-hmm. And as the system doesn't have the infrastructure set up for wraparound services for these families to voluntarily just walk in and say, hey, I need help and I need someone to put all of these pieces together, because ultimately that would be ideal if one of the families that we work with, because we do work with very similar populations, sometimes completely the same, mm-hmm. if one of my moms were to walk in and say, I need help, and have all of these therapists and case managers come around them without being part of the system, that would be amazing. Mm-hmm. But this is only available once they become identified by the system, which means for those listening, it would be lovely if this could be a voluntary thing that you walked into a mental health provider or a recovery, building and say, hey, I need this. And then you would have access to all of that, especially for people who don't have resources. So if their insurance doesn't cover certain things, if they don't have the money to pay for this, but this is just something that the system would do for them. But the only way that they can get this support is becoming identified by the criminal justice system.
It's interesting that you say that, because the same young lady who I was just talking about, who was keeping track of her negative drug screens, she graduated our program. And when you graduate my program, or our program, it's not just mine. I have a wonderful group of people that work with me. When you graduate our program, your Department of Child Services cases on that day are closed. So judge goes ahead, signs the dismissal. You're given your diploma, your gift from us, and then your case closure notes, right? Or your case closure. So a little while after she graduated, I got a phone call from her that said, I've had a lapse. What do I do? DCS was not involved. The courts were not involved. The intervention of the courts at all. She had no legal obligation to report this, mm-hmm. but she did at a huge risk to her and her girls, calling and saying, I've had a lapse. What do I do? And so then we went from there. But it works, that was harm reduction for her. Mm-hmm. That was a situation where she was like, I had a lapse. I'm scared. You're the only resource I know. Can you help?
Right.
She didn't lose her girls that time.
Well, and imagine because you gained that trust with her, that rapport, because she learned to trust you, that she knows when I reach out to Iris, I'm reaching out to Iris, and Iris knows the system. Iris knows the next right step for me. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, she had to learn that through becoming identified and intervention with the criminal justice system. But you, because of who you are, and because they hired amazingly well when they hired you, and took you from me. But you know how to see the person. Mm-hmm. And not the label of criminal. Mm-hmm. And as we've talked about in earlier episodes, if you've listened to our discussion with Dan Cannon, the idea of the criminal class and the set apart, if you are a special person like Iris who can build that rapport and see the person and not the charge, that is ideal. So Iris, because you work with families who are suffering from the disease of addiction, mm-hmm. you have a unique perspective that I think that our listeners really need to hear. So tell us, as you understand it, what is the story that just regular people on the street who maybe don't know someone or don't realize that they know someone who suffers from the disease of addiction? What story do we tell about those people?
So I don't know that we tell a story. That's part of the problem, I feel like. So our community does a great job at educating during Recovery Month and around overdose awareness and things like that when it's that specific month. This is a year-round, every second of every day problem. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we educate as often or as much as we can. And when I say that, everyone has been touched or knows somebody who has been touched by the disease. I think we need to focus more on prevention and treating the entire family. And we don't do that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We don't do that. And we also are operating under the stigma of, okay, well, addiction is a choice or it's not a disease. And I feel like so many people believe, specifically, I'll speak to my work, so many people believe that people are choosing drugs over their children. Mm-hmm. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. I don't understand how they could choose that over their child.
So let's unpack that, because I think that is the most commonly told story that I've heard, at least, mm-hmm. that people who are in their addiction or in active addiction are choosing that world mm-hmm. and choosing that life. So can we talk a little bit about the difference between making that choice and actually what leads them into a full-fledged addiction, and then what it looks like? What is that?
So the choice to use the first time is there. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I believe that you choose to pick up, right? And that's a choice that people make most of the time. It's a choice. But if you struggle, if you have the disease and you pick up, you're not going to put it down until you can figure out, or until you can get the help that you need, until you can get people in your life who care, until you can change the people, places, and things. That phrase is true. Changing people, places, and things is real. We're asking people to give up everything they've ever known, which is drugs, when we're asking them to get sober.
So let's talk about what you said, that the choice to use for the first time is a choice, which, of course, 99.9% of the time, there's always an exception. But most of the time, that is an active choice. But can we talk about how many people in the population make that choice and can walk away then? For example, people who use drugs mm-hmm. kind of quote unquote recreationally, but because they're not hardwired for addiction. That's not in their genetics. That's mm-hmm. not in their DNA. They can walk away from it, and how those same people then can judge those who can't, without understanding that it's just because you somehow won the genetic lottery and drugs and alcohol do not switch on that part of your brain that mm-hmm. it does for people who suffer from this disease. And can we talk a little bit about the way that hardwiring actually creates this disease? And you don't know. You don't know if you're one of the ones who carry that hardwiring.
You don't. You can know if you're predisposed, if it's in your family, if you feel like, it's in your genes, that sort of thing. I do feel like it's a genetic disease. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nobody's walking around choosing to get cancer.
Right.
We don't go out here and choose to get diabetes. Mm-hmm. These are things that, we're treating that are diseases, but we don't treat the disease of addiction as a disease oftentimes.
Right.
And so you don't know. You can know if you're predisposed. You don't know. Mm-hmm. Some people can walk into a bar and have 1 beer or 2 beers and call it a night and not have to continue and continue and continue and wake up the next morning, continue and continue and continue. They can. Mm-hmm. Some can't.
So I'm going to just jump in here. I'm curious because excuse me, while I realize that for me, there's tons of addictions, right?
Mhm.
And it's neat that you said diabetes, you said cancer, because, cigarettes are a drug.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Caffeine is a drug. Sugar, in many ways, can be a drug, right? Because these are all things we can be addicted to, right? And then society, our food manufacturers, our FDAs, or whatever, have allowed things to be put in things that we consume on a daily basis. Yes, it is our choice to consume them, but it was not our choice to put what addictive manner was in the element, right? For us as individuals to become addicted to. So I'm just curious that we had this conversation. I mean, definitely specifically in if we're talking about Clark County and we're talking about the opioid epidemic, because not everybody ran out and grabbed a needle, right? Some of these were actually prescriptions that came from a doctor, right? Our medical providers somewhere were supposed to be safe, and then later were penalizing them with jail. So I love that your court specifically is a court of solutions, right? We look at the problem, and we're trying to eradicate or rid of the over incarceration, right? So because in Clark County, I think it's 700, no, in the state of Indiana, I think it's like 700 people per thousand that actually go to jail. And in Clark County, we have 100, like roughly a population of 113 people. That means we've got 76,000 people going in and out of jail. And I'm wondering, like, how many of them are going to jail because they have a substance abuse problem? Now, if we relate that to black or white, I mean, this is a long conversation. This is a long question, right? Because, Clark County is predominantly white. And we know in the 80s, most folks went to jail. If you were in Clark County, most of the black people went to jail for addiction or whatever. And so now we're seeing reverse, because now we're saying, well, addiction is a disease, not a choice. But we're still using this word choice as if some folks actually had a choice to take that first step.
And I agree with that. And I actually was thinking about that as well. There's such a huge percentage of folks who I see who are like, I got in a car accident, or I had some dental work, or I was injured playing sports and I was prescribed pain meds. And that started my journey, right?
Yes.
And then I also have folks who are saying, my doctor prescribed me hydrocodones, or my doctor prescribed me Adderall. Adderall's huge, like that's been a huge one. And I don't know what to do, like without, when I don't have any more of it to take. It's just that's a huge, I'm glad you made that point, because I was actually sitting here thinking about that too. Large percentage of folks who come in and say, I had an injury and I was prescribed pain meds.
So let's follow that path down, because I'm thinking of a few moms that I worked with that was their journey as well. So at 13, you got in a car accident, or you got into an accident in sports, playing a school sport, and you were given pain meds, not knowing that your brain then switched on. And when it was time to stop taking that pain medication, which, your buddy over there stopped taking their pain medication, it was fine. And so you went in not knowing that this could even be a problem, that turned something on in you, and it was time to stop taking them. Your body reacted and you started going through withdrawals, and you're looking for, at that point, anything to medicate those feelings and those actual real symptoms that you're having. And then at what point, you're right, at what point was that a choice that this person had no idea, and they trusted a doctor? Of course they did. And they were in pain. You have to do it, so this is not such a cut and dry thing. I do want to go back to something that Miguel said, though, that now we are seeing it as a disease when it was our children, it's our neighbors who are starting to suffer from this disease. Before, when we were incarcerating and not treating as a disease, when we were criminalizing behavior, that's when it was the other. It was people from that side of the tracks, or it was, predominantly black people. So white people could say, oh, look at that, they're terrible. That's so terrible. And obviously, we can talk about the crack epidemic and the introduction of drugs by the actual government, but we won't do that in this setting.
Why not? Because they did it and they're still doing it. I mean, the biggest drug dealer in this country is America, right? I mean, our police, our sheriffs, they benefit from incarcerating people every day. They benefit from the drugs that they take off the street and resell. They benefit from taking guns off the street and reselling them, right? Let's stop here. I'm gonna beat this one. Let's stop the bullshit, right? and let's be honest about it, right? We like to identify as those things or those entities or institutions that we identify as peacekeepers, right? But the reality of it is they are machines of war. They are tools of war. They carry guns just like the rest of the people. They take orders just like the rest of the people. But their job is not to maintain status quo, right? Unless it's their status, which is, let's be honest, right?
Power.
It's a power control construct, and nobody wants to go back. But America is built on the trade. I'm not even want to say slavery. It's built on the trafficking of people. That is our economy. Always has been. So I know the court don't want to say that, and you probably can't say that. So I'm not going to ask you to say that.
I want to make a note that Miguel and I are 100% having this conversation, and Iris is not.
But here's the thing: if we're going to talk about truth, this is the conversation. And if you can't listen to this and understand that this is the conversation that many people are having, then as Iris's court is a problem solving, I'm going to say you're part of the problem, and maybe you should go to her court and get some solutions. Because they're not locking you up; they're helping you go on a journey. And I love that part. But let's be honest. So Common Conversations is about the conversations that we're having at our table. And we're talking about equity. We're talking about social justice. We're talking about, redoing, undoing, rewriting a system that is not flawed, but designed the way that it is. Then we have to have this conversation. And part of that is our justice system is part of our economic growth. It benefits whatever, maybe the right word. Somebody is economists out there. You guys can toss me the right words, but the fact of the matter is that they make money off of this shit. I mean, and I think that we can't have this conversation about where we are now and without talking about where we've been. That we created a war, and we created a war on drugs that was created to remove a large population of people from the voting bloc. And for more information on this, you should read the New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and she'll enlighten you on this. However, and also that was very intentional, but the unintentional result has led us to where we were. The people who were masterminding that move didn't expect it to then come into their own home. They didn't expect to see this problem trickle into their neighborhood, into their house. And that's what's happened now. And now we're able to see it for what it is, that we've created a huge problem. And the problem being that our children, our neighbors, our friends are hardwired for addiction. They are now using these, the substances that were criminalized before, and still, to be fair, are criminalized, but we're now looking at it as from a supportive lens rather than just punitive as we used to. And so that leads us to, again, this amazing idea that maybe always should have been the case, that maybe we shouldn't have been creating criminal classes and criminalizing this behavior, but looking at it as someone who is suffering from a disease, no different than cancer or diabetes, like you mentioned. But and we would never be punitive towards people who have cancer, yet people who suffer from this disease, we still want to look at through that punitive lens, and we want to judge them for their decisions. So that's the stories we have told. Mm-hmm. What's the truth? And I think we've hinted at the truth already about people who suffer from this disease. What other truths can you tell us from your work?
People are suffering. They're out here trying to achieve housing. They're out here trying to get jobs. They're out here trying to secure some sort of transportation because our public transportation system is beyond broken here.
Can we? To be real, again, we are not Louisville.
No.
Yet we rely heavily on a public transit system that is based in Louisville, and we ask them to serve all of our needs. And our families and our people cannot access these resources without transportation. We don't live in that kind of world. We do not have the transit infrastructure set up. So I do want to talk more about that. So like you said, they're suffering. Mm-hmm. These are people who are aware of their addiction, want to get help. But Iris, and I'm 100% playing devil's advocate here. Well, if someone wants help, they can go get it, right? It's accessible. If someone wants a job, they can go get a job, right? Or housing, they can, if they really wanted it, they would get it, right?
So I'll start with the treatment question. Yeah, they can. We have some excellent treatment providers in our area. That's why they have a wait list 2 miles long. And, I'm extremely lucky in what I do that I have partnered with a couple of agencies locally here who do try to prioritize our folks that come through our program. That's the folks that come through my program. A small percentage of the folks in our county who are suffering are who we get to serve, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, they can. They just have to wait. Or they show up and then they miss, or they show up and then they miss because they don't have transportation, or they miss because they are at a job interview, or they miss because their ride didn't show up, or they miss because they live with their mom and she OD'd. Like all of these scenarios, this is real life stuff that these people go through every day. You and I, we went out this morning, we got our coffee, we got in our cars that started right up, that brought us here today to do this podcast and have this interview. And we had no issues. Mm-hmm. We had no issues. We pulled out our wallet. We paid the guy for our coffee, told him to have a great day, have a good weekend. We got in our cars and we came here.
And 2 days ago, you know what? I went out and went to start my car. It didn't start. And I was able to pull out my card and buy that $250. Why batteries? Why? Buy the $250 battery.
Why cold weather?
I know. I hate you. And then go about my business. That disrupted my day for about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
That is not the case for someone who $250 is going to take them out.
You pulled out your card, right?
Uh-huh.
Think about being able to pull out a debit card, because a lot of my folks don't even have access to a bank account because they owe banks money, or they are in the negative, or they don't have an ID to go and get a bank account, or they don't have anything that's going to be direct deposited, and they don't have anything to put in it.
So the simplest act that we take for granted is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So the privilege to be able to open a bank account. And if you are in check systems because you owe a bank money, or you have, issues in your past, something that you did when you were younger, and in active addiction, you are going to continue to pay for that. There are banks that will open it at a hefty fee. You will pay for the right to do what the rest of us do for free. It's also poverty tax. It costs a lot. It costs a lot to be poor. So you're saying that people want help, and it is not as easy as just being able to go out and get a job. Well, everyone's hiring.
Mm-hmm. They are. You have to be able to get there.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to get there on the schedule that they want to put you on in order to achieve that job. You can want a job all day. You can be employable. You can be sober, and you can go and you can be hired. You have to be able to get there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and I know we're throwing a lot of things around, and we're coming up on our half hour. We can stay longer if you want. It's up to you. I'm curious to.
I do have a lot more to say.
All right, let's go. So then, I'm going to let you share as much as you want. So I'm curious to what programs exist to help counter the disparities, right? So we're saying, hey, if we've got this disease of addiction and we're being affected in a numerous of societal economic ways, housing, job opportunities, transportation, are there things in Clark County that are set up to allow folks to get back on, let's say, the level, right? To get back to zero, right? Where they can start building again?
That's a good question, right? So Thrive is a program that has been implemented. I know that they will help with rides to treatment, like to and from treatment. I know Medicab is semi-available, but it's not very reliable, but also, again, to treatment and from treatment. As far as to work or to the grocery store or to go pick your kid up from after school programming or anything like that, no, I don't know of any. I have no knowledge of any.
Mm-mm. And even rideshare programming like Lyft and Uber that is very expensive. If you're going to rely on that, you have to have a card and a cell phone that has an app.
Yeah, so that's funny you say that, because luckily my program has a grant, it's a federal grant, and so we are able to help people with rides. And so one of my girls had one of my ladies had an appointment for a substance use assessment last week. It was at 12:30. I went to send her an Uber to pick her up. She lives in Clarksville. Her appointment was in Jeffersonville. It was $44 because it was lunch time.
For an Uber?
Uh-huh.
In Southern Indiana.
It was $44.
And let's talk about that as well. Again, that was for a treatment-related thing or a medical thing. So let's just touch on this. If you did not know, so Medicab is a program that if you have Medicaid, you can access limited numbers of rides, depending on the type of Medicaid you have. Also, you have to know that you can access limited numbers of rides to and from health appointments. You have to give something like, it used to be 48 hours notice, now it's 72. That type of planning and thinking ahead when you live in chaos, when you live in survival mode, to know where you're supposed to be in 72 hours to make that phone call. And also, I want those of us listening to think, how much do we hate picking up a phone? No, nobody wants to call anybody. And that's a skill. It's an art that we have lost. And we are asking folks to do that and then possibly have to call back and call back and call back because we're not going to get an answer. It's the same thing with treatment. Picking up that phone the first time, especially not only if you have the disease of addiction, but then you also suffer from depression that is a motivator killer, making that first phone call might be all you have.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have to call back because these doors are not easily opened, you lose people. You lose people to hopelessness. I just can't, there's no one there to help me. I can't do this. So I'm hearing you, the truth being people are suffering. They want more. The infrastructures do not exist in our community to get them like Miguel said, from a -10 to a zero level. So what's standing in the way? Why don't we have those systems that are equitable? Can we talk about that also? Because a lot of your families, I'm guessing, because they're the families that we work with as well, also deal with everything and all the stressors that come with poverty. And what I do know firsthand, because I've had friends who've done it, people who have private insurance, people who have a little bit of money in their accounts, they can get this help with very little extra effort. So you may be listening and saying, well, I know my neighbor, she called, the treatment center and she was able to get in that same day and, everything was fine. But did your neighbor have insurance that could pay for it, that could pay for a different facility that didn't have a month-long waiting list? And so there's an equity issue between those who have insurance and who can pay for this and those who do not. What stands in the way of this being an equitable system?
So when you say insurance, people who have private insurance versus people who have Medicaid, I want to touch on that real quick because, of course, our treatment providers are going to accept folks who have private insurance because do you know why? The per diems are much higher for those folks.
The reimbursement rates?
Yes.
Much better.
Much better. And so they have to make money, right? And so what's standing in the way? I'm sorry.
So what's standing in the way of making the system more equitable so anyone who needs help and wants help can get it, and maybe they don't have to be involved, they don't have to come to the attention of the justice system to get the amazing support that you're able to offer? We
don't have enough in our community. We don't have enough support surrounding that. We don't have the funding. I don't know who's applying. We don't have enough beds and bodies, right? And so I feel like even talking about the folks who are doing the work, the therapists who are over here in Indiana doing the work, they're on the front lines, they're seeing these folks, they're working their butts off every single day. They could go right across the bridge 5 miles from here and make a crap ton more money.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's a huge thing too, like being able to educate, train your workforce, and also pay them for the work that they're doing when literally they could see Louisville from their office and go over there and make so much more money.
Yes.
And so that's a huge piece of making the quality of services equitable, or the quantity, of services equitable. We just don't have, in our community specifically in Clark County, we have very few agencies who are up in operation and doing and providing the services that our county needs as a whole, that our folks need.
And I know you, Iris, to be someone who is very passionate about this and who will speak about this. And you've said, we don't talk about this enough. Is that a path to bringing equity? When, those of us who kind of sleep comfortably at night lay in bed thinking, my neighbor is suffering. My friend has an addiction and has a disease, and we are treating them like garbage because they've burned bridges with us. But what if that's a disease? So if we helped people to grow empathy in that way, to understand it for what it is that another path to making this community more habitable for people who have this disease?
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about earlier with educating the whole family, right? Because family is not just blood. Family is family. And so family could be your close friends. Family could be your neighbor. Family could be, your sister's cousin's boyfriend's family. It doesn't really matter. So like treating the entire family is something I feel like we are also lacking in respect to educating the family members, educating those folks who are living with someone who struggles with the disease or who has the disease or who is looking for someone on the streets who has the disease. Like trying to educate the entire family as to, 1, it's not a choice. 2, it's not your fault. Quit taking it upon yourself. And 3, this is what we can do for this person at this time.
So what I'm hearing is the reduction of stigma.
Yeah.
So we can have the conversation without shame and without that stigma. I also think, and we know this, that generations before us, we just didn't talk about this. We didn't talk about anything.
No.
We didn't tell the truth because you have to make it look good on the outside. And there are a lot of us who grew up in a world where you just have to make it look good on the outside. So what you didn't know was that your uncle was an alcoholic, or what you didn't know was that someone in your family has this disease that then you might be genetically predisposed to. And because of stigma, we didn't talk. Because of shame, we didn't talk. So if we can reduce the stigma, reduce the shame, and have this conversation in a real way. So when my child, because I am from family on both sides who have some lost their battle with addiction, and because they were doing it quietly in a closet where we couldn't tell the truth about what was happening. What I have been able to tell my daughter, because I know our lineage, because I know someone finally did tell me the truth, and I'm like, you know what? When you take that first drink, you need to pay attention. You have to pay attention to what turns on in your brain. What are you now like? Oh, that felt a little better than it should have, and then we can talk about it. But if you're going in blind and all of your friends, you're at a party, all of your friends are drinking, so then they're fine. They're able to put it down and you can't. You might know why if someone has had that conversation with you. And if we're telling the truth.
I think prevention is a huge thing too. We don't do enough prevention. So let's go in our schools and talk to our kids and let's be truthful with them. I don't think we do enough of that.
You don't think just say no, or you don't think that worked?
No. I mean, I think it was a great idea and a great start, of course, because there was education in that, right? But we don't do enough, especially now where literally I'm seeing stories in the news about fentanyl pills looking like Smarties. I literally just saw that in the news yesterday evening about how we're passing this stuff off as candy and it's deadly. And our kids are getting a hold of it because their parents have it, or their brothers and their sisters, or they're selling it at school, or this, that, and the other. And I think that we could do more work in our community as a whole on the prevention side of things.
I love the idea of prevention, because just say no doesn't, in a sense, just say no. Like I've told my kid, like, hey, don't do drugs, right? But then I had to say, okay, this is why you don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because these are the things that can happen, right? You don't want to be on a street corner saying, I'll suck a blank, to get a fix, right? But that's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people who say, I'll ask them, like, why do you do harder drugs? And they were like, because I didn't want to be on the street corner saying, I'll suck it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of other reasons to get out there, right? Because here's the thing, like when we say, you're at a party and everybody's drinking, so why not you? The question is, why not you, right? What's happening in your universe that says, I'm going to smoke my first joint? I'm going to take that first cigarette. I'm going to take that first, beverage, right? We start smoking cigarettes and then we have a beer because we get a buzz, and all of a sudden there's a feeling. But what are we trying to escape? Are we really talking about the lives that we live, right? The idea there are so many people who live in this world who are just surviving.
Mm-hmm.
They want to thrive, right? Whether it's economically, whether it's social, whether it's, we're fighting, who we are internally, what we look like, what we feel like, do I eat too much? Do I not eat enough? We as people, we're flawed, right? And then sometimes the abuse of a substance comes along with that journey. Again, going back to your court system and talking about we deal with the problem, and I hope that, and I guess this is more of a question, when we say we're dealing with the problem, and we're offering solutions to a situation, are we really going back to a transaction that occurred in a person's life that was their first, right? Because that was the start of it. And what helped that decision, and I'm not a therapist, but I do wonder sometimes if we can take it back to there. Does that start to say, now we can move forward? Because we understand that first transaction. I know why I smoked my first joint, right? Because I wanted to get along. I was hanging out with the buddies. I was young, and they was like, yeah, try. And I got tired of finally saying no. And so finally I smoked one and was like, oh, this is cool. But for me, I didn't like it. I didn't really care for it too much. I was like, I'm not really in control of me, right? I don't do this shit. And then, of course, I saw the school teacher in the corner talking about, if you give me a piece of crack, I suck you. And I was like, yo, definitely don't want to do crack, right? Crack bad. But, not to make funny of it, but it's my truth, right? And so I think again, going back to, Iris's court and here in Clark County and saying, hey, we're solution driven, right? We want to attack it from the root of the issue in that individual within that family. And do y'all really do you really peel back the layer of the onion, right? And get to the transaction of it.
That's our goal. So everyone who walks through that door has trauma. And over the last 5 to 7 years, I would say everything that we've done has been trauma focused. Everything that we have trained on, everything that we have implemented in our treatment systems are now trauma focused, because literally those people that walk in, I don't know if you've heard of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Their ACEs scores are through the roof. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know when they started or how they started, or if they started on their own volition or if they were prescribed medication. I don't know their story yet, but my goal is to get to know their story. And our goal as a team is to get to know their story. And I'll go back to, I'm so grateful for the therapists that we have. We have a couple, actually 3 that sit on our staffing team, because they do help us peel back that layer of our onion. Because sometimes I do come at it from a probation officer standpoint. I'm like, well, that's a petition to revoke, like you can't why you keep lying, because it's frustrating.
It is frustrating to be lied to constantly.
Yeah. I go to work to get lied to.
I mean, you're not wrong.
But, like at the end of the day, also, we are peeling back the layer of that onion. I'm so grateful for those therapists who sit in the room and say, dude, chill. His basic needs aren't being met right now. He doesn't know where he's going to live tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know where he's going to live after court today or how he's going to get there.
Yeah, can we talk about like Maslow's hierarchy that
Can you just chill for a sec? You know, like quit dressing him down because he's literally in survival mode because he doesn't know how he's going to survive.
Yes. And I think that we need to have that discussion that we're tying, people get frustrated and they lose patience with people who are in active addiction because of all those bridges that get burned. But if we can see it as a symptom of a disease, and again, we're human, so we need someone to remind us, like, this is part of the journey. I need that for when I am working with people, and I've been doing this for 20 years. I need someone to be like, Missy, remember that this person comes from a history of trauma, that they started this addiction to escape that trauma. And until that need is met, and like you said, until their basic needs in that Maslow's hierarchy, their foundation is strong, then nothing. You're going to get nowhere, and they're going to lie to you. And that's just what it is. And
they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear.
Right, exactly. I guess what I'm curious if leaders in this community and people, we always talk about the power brokers and the people who can make these decisions. One of the things that I want to hear and what I want to repeat is something that you said about a small percentage of the people who suffer from this disease right now are in your program. So a small percentage of the community has access to this amazing wraparound of love and support and problem solving. What do we need to do as a community? And this might be rhetorical unless you have the answer, and then I'm all about it. What do we need to do as a community to make sure that anyone and everyone can have access to that support and wraparound?
One, I think that we need to all operate as a team because everybody comes at this with a completely different set of skill, right? So a completely different set of circumstances or a completely different background. Everybody comes at this from a completely different area of expertise. And so I think all of the stakeholders coming to the table and putting my business is my business and these are my clients aside and putting their own egos aside. And I'm including myself in this. I'm saying everybody who has a stake in this, come together and have a conversation about what does our ideal community look like with respect to this disease? How can we collectively as these professionals, because to dress it down a little bit, on Wednesdays, the multidisciplinary team that I have the pleasure of working with, they come at it from all different areas and it works. Do we agree all the time? Heck no. Do we sometimes argue? Yeah. But do we leave knowing that we did the best we could to try to solve whatever problem was in front of us? Yeah. Is it frustrating sometimes? Yes. But am I so proud of the fact that these people are ready, willing, and able to step up to the plate every single Wednesday? Hell yes.
So I'm hearing underneath what you're saying, a foundational issue in Southern Indiana, that we are siloed. And what that means for those who don't use that language is that we all live in our worlds, we all live in our bubbles. And I can look at the other silos. So I'm in mine as working, the program manager for Healthy Families and with New Hope Services. So I know the way we do business. And I can look it over at another service provider and be like, ugh, they need to do this better. They can do this better. I can look at them and see their flaws, which I'm sure someone can look it over at us and see ours. And we don't talk. We don't come to the playground together and all bring our balls to play.
Exactly.
We stay and play in our own houses. I mean, God bless. I probably... That's not our toys.
What you said. Let's just keep digging that hole.
Right. I'm just going to keep on going. So we all keep our own toys in our own houses, and we don't come to the playground together and learn how to play nice because we don't have the foundation for that. We don't have an infrastructure that encourages that.
And when do you have time to do it? Do you?
I mean,
so everybody,
I'm not wrong.
Respectfully, all of these people that I'm like saying, let's come to the table. When are we going to do that?
I mean, and also
everyone is exhausted.
We are.
So I want to jump in here because I'm not part of the system, right?
Yeah.
Or the service providers.
I'm not part of your system.
No, not at all. And I try my best to stay the hell out of it. But it's crazy because you're both providers, right? In the community, talking about we want to bring equity into the community. We want it to be better. First of all, I'm going to go on a limb and say neither one of your programs can define what equity actually looks like. And then, let's be honest. We want to strive for equity, but we haven't taken the time.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing. We haven't taken the time to put an infrastructure in place to build equity. But we want to do a thing. I mean, in the business world, we would say, well, that's not going to work. Good luck, see you in bankruptcy, right? Because you're working on something without a plan or goal, and you won't take time to do the actual work. So that goes back to understanding where we are within our organizations. So if we're saying, hey, we've got all these service providers that want to build equity, but we won't take the time to play together, isn't that a fail? I hate using the word failure, but that's definitely a failed culture, right? Because what we're talking about in essence is cultural change.
Yes. Well, and I think another thing that we need to add to the discussion, and something that Iris alluded to, is the reason that we stay so siloed. One of the reasons is I spend 40 hours a week doing what my program needs, and those wheels keep spinning and they never stop. So I can, and for 20 years, it has been the case that we all we're so busy but to toot our horn a little bit, Miguel, how much time and effort have we put into saying, this needs to happen. We need to tell the truth. We need to bring these agencies together and create this platform. But we had to do so at the expense of our time. And we had to be willing to give that up to create a platform to tell these truths and to make sure that we hear, this is the road, this is the path to equity.
Well, for me, sacrificing my time, there's no sacrifice when I live in a community that is not a community of equity, right? This is not a community in that sense, right? So when we think about community world, let's just think about social contracts. And I'm the business guy over here. Terminology is not my thing when it comes to politics, people, places, things, social welfare, et cetera, right? But let's talk about social contracts, right? So social contracts are basically these agreements that we come together to say, hey, this is how we're going to live together. This is how we're going to execute. This is what we're going to build, right? So we have this broken social contract.
Yes, we do.
Because we're screaming, hey, we want to help build equity. We want to help those who are, facing substance abuse, and we don't want to penalize them. We don't want this to be a penal, right, or an incarceration situation. We want to make sure that we put them in a thriving relationship within our community. But in our community, if you're saying everybody who's pushing forward to make this happen is all they saying is we have to do what's right by our program. But when do you start doing right by the people? Because if your program serves people and all you focus is on the program, then your program has failed. Right? If the community that says we want to better our community is only focused on itself, not the community, then there's no community, right? We have a culture that is broken, and it will consistently be separated by those who, are in survival mode, those who get to thrive, and then those who, we're out there in the ether, right? We'll have to figure that part out. So, and so I hear this and I'm saying, you're right, Missy. What do we do to bring it to the table? How do we start? We start by asking the questions,
right.
And hopefully over 20, 30, 50 years, someone says, how about we put an action plan in place? I think sometimes it's stripping out some of the leaders because they just can't see through a different lens. But on the other side of that, I wonder, do we have advocates in our community who are bridging the relationships of service providers? And they're specifically speaking for the people, those who are facing domestic violence, those who are facing substance abuse, those who are facing, being separated from homes, we're calling DCS, and then are we having cultural conversations about that as well? Because, where we live in a community that's predominantly white, we still have cultural differences even in the white community. And we definitely have cultural differences in the Black community. And when you're in a predominantly white community, you have predominantly white service providers telling Black people and Hispanic and Latino people what they should or shouldn't be doing, who culturally are ignorant as hell. You know what I mean? So so I know that's so
how do we do it? How do we do it? Is we tell the truth, and we do this, and we call the leaders to the table and create a table that doesn't exist right now. And that's the hope. That's the hope. And also pointing out the places that we know we can do better, because we spend a lot of time, and I spend a lot of time praising my staff because they kill themselves. But what we know is that we can create a system where we all can work together and we can do better. So it's like, I don't want service providers to hear this and be discouraged and say, I'm doing everything I know how to do. There is another way, and there is a better way that we all can work together. But those of us who are able need to build that table together. And until it's put in front of them, until these conversations, these truths are told, no one's going to do it.
I can dig it. I'm a charge, and I've been charging everybody since COVID, or actually right before COVID, but I don't even think I put a definition to it until 2019. And I charge our service providers in our community. I charge our community at a whole, who anyone is having this conversation, to define what equity looks like, right? And then come together and let's come come at a common definition, and then let's work from there. Because I think that's super important. Definitely if we're going to say we're a community, right? And we all want to live in a community where we can all thrive. I can only hope that is everybody's, mission, right? Is that we all thrive, because there is an opportunity for us all to thrive. Iris, I'm curious, like, because we're about an hour into this, and the journey is real. And what are takeaways? I love your court, right? So tell us who your court is. Like, what are some takeaways as we are taking people through this journey of recovery that are great benefits, and how we can continue to help?
So I love my program too. I do. Yeah. Before I answer that, I do want to say that whenever I started working for Family Recovery Court, there were 5 folks in the program, 5 individuals. It was just myself who my judge told me that I was going to take it over. So I did. And we have since grown into, like I said earlier, we have 43 participants right now, 2 case managers, an admin staff, and a magistrate judge that I get the pleasure of working with as well. I am so grateful for the folks that do come to our table. We have a wonderful, wonderful team of people, and they are service providers. Like I said, they're attorneys. I'm so grateful for our Department of Child Services being willing to come in and say, yes, we will give you a unit specifically for Family Recovery Court participants, because that's what harbors our success, is that streamlining that support from the same individuals every single week for our folks. So I know the only thing constant is change, right? However, they are working with the same set of individuals throughout their whole journey through the Department of Child Services case. And that's another one of our goals too, is so that they're not changing service providers, every 2 seconds.
So you're telling me that DCS, touch that, created a unit. Does that mean that those people only have that caseload? So
pretty much they're 90% of their caseloads, unless they have some spillover from before, are just Family Recovery Court cases.
So what I'm also hearing, knowing what DCS numbers look like, is that they are able to really devote more time and attention than they would to other families, because we know DCS workers in those caseloads are outrageous. And I mean, we're talking an amount of people that there is no way you can provide good service to, that these staff are able to really focus and provide quality attention and support the way that the system really was meant to.
I believe so, and their caseloads are not lower than other folks that are at DCS, other family case managers at DCS, but they do devote much more time, I feel like, because they do come to court every Wednesday. They come to staffing every Wednesday. I mean, we are in constant communication with them, so we're an added level of support for each other as well throughout this journey,
which is incredible,
which is excellent.
It is.
We all need that.
There is no worker out there who should be doing it on an island, and yet so many do.
Yeah, they do. I'm sorry. What was your question, actually? Because I really wanted to talk about my team, because I love them so much.
Who knows? I'd just be making stuff up.
Okay.
Well, you did ask who's your court.
Oh, well, yes. Who's your court? Because, I happen to really love your judge. She's super cool. I've gotten the privilege of hanging out with her for a really long time, but I want you to say who she is.
Okay.
And then on the journey to recovery, how can the community better help you in the work that y'all do?
Okay. So I work for Judge Vicki Carmichael, and she is Clark County Circuit Court number 4 judge, and also the head judge in Clark County. And then my magistrate is Magistrate Joni Grayson, and she and I have worked together since we took it over 6-7 years ago in Clark County here, the Family Recovery Court. So it's a great privilege every day to work with those 2 ladies and work for those 2 ladies. I make them mad. I do things and then ask for forgiveness later, but we also have a great working relationship. So, and they have sort of let me forge partnerships with the folks that I have forged the partnerships with and build the team that I've built, and they have supported me along the way most of the time. And so I'm grateful for them. And then, like I said, Department of Child Services, we have 5 family case managers that sort of come every single week and come to staffing. And then their staff attorney comes, and as well as we partner with Family Arc in Jeffersonville and ACP in Jeffersonville as well for our treatment agencies. And they're at the table every single week in constant communication with those folks, work very closely with them. And those are the therapists that I was talking about who sort of keep us level-headed in staffing and are able to explain to us like we got a long way to go, like let's chill.
To bring you back.
Yes. And then several agencies in the area who do, the visitation supervising and do the home-based casework and things like that. We're so lucky to have those guys at the table too, and CASA.
So I guess the final question is, what can we do to support not only your work, but people in the community who haven't had the privilege to meet you yet need support?
So I think stuff like this is huge. I think things like this and opportunities like this is huge for me to be able to come and talk about what we do and what's available and what's out there. And I also think that having conversations in general is important. And, quite frankly, I don't know that anybody in other agencies know necessarily what I do. There are people at the courthouse who don't even know what I do. And so, but who has time to educate those folks?
Who has time?
And you probably wouldn't know what I do if I didn't work for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? You may not know that Family Recovery Court exists, but for our relationship previously working together.
Right.
And so I think things like this are huge, and being able to have people at the table who you're not like used to sitting on the playground at lunch with,
Yeah, that's totally true.
I think it's a huge piece.
I just want to come sit at the playground. Where is it?
Come on.
Where's playground at?
501 East Court Avenue.
Oh, I gotta come to court. I'm not coming. I take that back. You can come to my playground.
There we go.
Let's go.
Any day here.
Well, that's a wrap. Are we good?
We're good.
Did it? Got it?
Got it good.
All right. Well, Iris, is there anything that you would like to add before we jump off this here podcast?
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Let's get it. All right.
Hi. I love her. I love Iris's mom.
Yeah. Missy, anything you want to throw out there in the wind?
Just, I'm glad we're having this conversation. Let's keep talking.
All right, let's go. This is your boy, Gale. This is Common Conversations. And y'all know how we get down. Unscripted, real life. As Missy called it earlier, it's about the truth, your truth. If you want to come sit down with us, you know how to find us, commonconvo.tv. And I'm over here in New Albany. Just come nice or I'm going to smack you. Yo, peace, love, and hair grease. See you in the next episode.
Bye, friends.
Thank you.